There's a way through this.
Our recent experience would tell us otherwise.
Fib, this is what we call a teachable moment. Oh, hey, welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett. If you've never listened to the show before, welcome. If you have listened to the show before, welcome back. In addition to providing entertaining and informative photography-related info, I also go on adventures with the crew of the Starship Fibonacci. Right now, we're trying to navigate through a cosmic dust cloud that is generating massive amounts of electricity. We have to find our way out without getting fried.
That would be optimal.
We just have to learn from our previous mistakes. On a similar note, we're discussing how to use your photography mistakes to propel you forward on your journey with our guest on this episode, JC Carey. That conversation right after the break.
Any thoughts on how to solve our dilemma?
Yes, but I need more data on those electrical discharges. Send out the probe. There's now members-only content on the Nerdy Photographer YouTube channel. That's right. Head over to youtube.com/@CaseyFatchett or click on the link in the episode notes. Go over, get a membership, and you will get access to special behind-the-scenes videos, members-only shorts, both the funny kind and, the learning kind, exclusive instructional content, and even members-only Q&A sessions where your questions take center stage. That's right. You can ask all of your questions about photography. Go deeper, learn more, become part of the inner circle. Don't miss out. Hit that join button on our YouTube channel and take your experience to the next level. Hello and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett, and I'm here today with JC Carey. JC, thank you very much for being here.
Really excited to be here. I really appreciated you giving me the offer. This is the first real photography podcast I've done. I've done some related to my music stuff that were more music based, and my photography was the end of it. Even though I don't play any music, I just shoot the pictures. But they wanted to talk about my reminiscings. But this is the first time I've ever been on one of these to just do photo.
So I think it's going to be fun. Before we get started, we're going to do the dice breaker. We're going to roll the dice. It is an 11. What is your favorite weird smell?
I grew up, I haven't done it in years, but my father would take me to Englishtown to the racetrack. And, and I grew out of that age, as we got older and my dad passed away. Like I no longer was into all that, but that smell of burnt rubber, will always, when I do smell it, will snap me back to better memories of being a kid rather than crappy ones. So
I think it's interesting
go with that.
I think it's interesting how, I think that smells, music, things like that, your senses have such a way of transporting you.
Oh, absolutely.
Somewhere, and you can it can be years since you've thought of something and you're just automatically thrown back to a place and a time. I think that good photography does that. I think that, there are smells, there are things that my dad was a fire investigator. So sometimes just the smell of a fire can bring me back to places.
I totally get you.
Yeah. So let's give a short synopsis of your photography journey for our listeners who may be unfamiliar with you.
Okay. I've always shot. I think like a lot of people. My dad got me a used F2 when I was a kid. Like I'd taken a class at school in 7th grade or something, and I was into it. I was like, this is pretty cool. And so he gets me the camera, and that was, I wish I still had it. I don't. Fast forward, I was okay. I was pretty good, but scared to take chances. I didn't have any money ever. So all my exposures were like this. I was scared of lighting. I was scared of doing anything besides taking a good picture. I was really not pretty scared of taking pictures of people. If I'm being perfectly honest, I think a lot of people start out that way. It was a lot of animals, a lot of landscapes, a lot of cityscapes and things like that. And if you fast forward a bit, ended up shooting. It doesn't make a difference. I mean, I moved to Canon at one point because I was a miserable manual focuser, and I had great vision until recently. This is a relatively new thing.
Same. We're both wearing glasses since this is an audio. We were both. I am experiencing the same thing.
Yeah, it's just about 42, 43. The close up fell right off like a cliff.
Yep.
So I ended up shooting Canon because at that time Canon had better autofocus. And I started to get a little good, and I started getting interested in lighting. And Joe McNally was really the guy that inspired me to pick up lights. And the whole speed lighting thing, was something that I thought I could afford. I did do a class in the middle, which I talk about from Fear to Flash, where I won't name the place because I don't want to shame them because they're pretty well known. But it was a miserable class, and it influenced everything that I've done since. I teach the opposite of the way that they taught me because it didn't really offer me anything. So I just fell into a journey where I constantly failed and constantly tried to get better at things, which I know we're going to talk about later. But
well, I mean, we talked about this, via email and just talking about failing forward, and I think that's something that we need to delineate, because I was mentioning it to my wife and she was like, wait, that could be confused with failing upward. And since we're both two white guys, we're not talking about failing upward. We're talking about, and I think that you brought up a good something that I shared in my photographic journey was when I started out, I was afraid of flash. I was totally afraid of, it was too complicated. And I come from a science background, and it's just it just seemed like it was too complex for me. And I think that there was a mindset of young and arrogant, where I was like, I don't need it. I don't need flash. I don't need to do that. And the same thing, you gravitate towards subjects that don't need it, and you're like, okay, I'm not gonna shoot flash because I don't need flash. But yeah, the failing forward, what does that mean to you, and how has it helped your mindset?
Your wife is wise because obviously we so failing forward for me has taken on a bunch of different things, but as far as the photography goes, I didn't go to school for it. I didn't, there was, and I tell people all the time when they're like, oh, don't you miss film or whatever? I'm like, nope. Because for me, I really didn't become a photographer. I didn't go from somebody who took photos to somebody who made photos, which is an important delineation to me until digital happened. And that instant feedback, that no longer being scared to take a chance and get an incorrect exposure, to this day, I don't spend any time looking at my histogram, not because I don't think that that's good form, but because I shoot such a flashy style and such a contrasty, dramatic style that the histogram would often be wrong. It would tell me that I was buried one way or the other. So, but right from the start, I had made this decision that I was going to be good at this. I was going to be good at it. I saw that people could do it, and I was like, all right, I can do this. And I started to say, Pocket Wizard, I think to a certain extent had a little bit of a influence on me getting forward, because once they came with what was called the TT5s at the time, the TT1,
I remember.
I was, as a Canon shooter, I did not have the creative lighting system that Joe McNally used with Nikon. And so I couldn't do high speed sync with their flashes off camera. There was a lot of things I couldn't do. And once that was available to me, all of a sudden it all clicked. It didn't click right away. I don't want to make it sound like all of a sudden I was some genius, but
the things that you wanted to capture were now available to you to capture.
Well, it became less that the camera was telling me what I could do and me telling the camera what I wanted it to do. Because, sync speed to me has always been like this great enemy. and I shoot within sync plenty now, but the idea that I had to shoot within a certain speed or I had to shoot at a certain aperture because I wanted a certain outcome rather than me making those decisions. So always I would pay attention. And the other reason, the other great part about digital because I know I tend to be a tangent guy,
Same.
was that having that ability to look back at my EXIF data and go, all right, so I did this and I did that, and going back and, even later on, once Lightroom came into my life, where I could look through all the pictures and go, how many did I shoot at this shutter speed or this f-stop, and go, maybe that was a mistake or maybe that was good, and I do find that I've stopped down a lot more these days than I used to, and that's because of looking at it and going, you were shooting wide open all the time and it wasn't to your benefit, maybe,
right.
like it's really influenced. So failing forward to me, just to get back to it, it was this process of continually having shoots where I was maybe happy with the happy accident and then trying to figure out how I made that one. And, because at the beginning, if I shot 100 pictures and 3 of them were good, I was pretty stoked. I was like, it was like, yay. But I preach not being critical in front of my subject of myself, but being critical of myself.
Right.
And being critical of, not in a, you're terrible, but in a, what could I do to make this better? What do I want to do the next time? What do I want to do? What different tool would make this better? What different technique would make this better? What technique that I thought was an accident or a mistake in the past would apply to this and make me have something that really works?
Right. Like seeing something that you did that you really liked and you weren't necessarily aiming for, and going like, okay, what did I do here that, got me to a place that I really like? Like, how do I recreate that and be able to like use that to my advantage moving forward? I think that a lot of people are afraid of, quote unquote, making mistakes. And
I based my whole career on it. Quite honestly, I deal with a lot of photographers, as you do, and and sometimes I see people that can make a whole living off of doing one thing, and I wish I was that person. That they just consistently can do it, and it's the same shot. And this isn't being critical of those people. I'm like, that's amazing that they've managed to be so good at one thing. I'm not so good at anything that I can do that. So I'm always trying to integrate, how can I make this or that work, and how can I take this and apply it towards this other thing that I'm passionate about, or this thing. And maybe to my own self-detriment, maybe I should have focused on one thing, but
yeah, I mean, there are moments where I'm a person who, I know what you're talking about, and I've met, talked to, interviewed some people who do like the one thing so well, they're very extraordinarily good at it. And it's kind of like, okay, wow, that's incredible. That is not how my mind works. I'm a person who wants to have as many tools in the toolbox as I can. Because I don't know what sort of situation I'm going to be in, or like you said, it might apply to a different type of photography than what I'm doing in this moment. And it's sort of like, I want to lock this away. Like, oh, if I happen to be in a spot where I'm going to do this, having this, knowledge, tool, whatever it is that can help me when I'm in that situation is to me, that scratches the part of the brain and how I personally work. I think that there are a lot of people out there who are so hyper-focused on like, I have to produce the highest quality image, and they've just like arbitrarily determined what that means in their head. And they're not willing to. It's weird because David Lynch, when we're recording this, David Lynch just passed away yesterday.
Died yesterday. Yeah.
And I've been watching a lot of clips of him. And one of the things that he talked about, and one of the clips that I revisited, was he gets really mad about schedules and modern film sets, and saying, like, they don't allow enough time for me to get dreamy, which to him meant like to play and to find like, okay, we've got what I set out to do, but I want to have time to play and do another thing.
Yep.
And I think that there's a lot of, I mean, obviously we have deadlines, and sometimes there's shoot restrictions and what we're going to do. But having that time, I think that one of the things that I've learned as a photographer, I don't know about you, but having that time to be able to do something and just play around for a while and maybe find something that is completely different than what we were aiming for to start with.
No, and I mean, I think that, me and you have met through me being in a teaching place, but not, I think, at class. But I always preach that idea that, all right, let's get the shot that we thought, but then now let's turn that one off. Let's turn this one on. Let's change our f-stop. Let's see what else would happen around here, and let's try to see if we get our model to do something else that we weren't planning on. And that's always a really important part of not only for me to keep it fresh, but to again, the idea of the happy accident, where it's not really an accident because you forced it through this picking, like you've got an egg and, it's hard boiled and you're peeling apart little bits of it to get it to the way you want. Or maybe it's better, like revealing a sculpture would probably be better analogy. But, just chipping away. And it looked really cool the way it was. And sometimes you're going to chip too much. And sometimes you're going to go, that didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay. Yeah. Don't let that be the thing. I think that almost everybody who's ever been to a live shoot with me has now, at this point, the people laugh at me about it, because every student will sometime go, hey, how's this look? And I'll go, how's it look to you? Because that's what matters.
Right.
And I teach process rather than recipe, because I don't think recipe, maybe in baking recipe is big, but the rest, because you have to follow a certain, thing to get things to rise and all that. But in the real world, I'm like, everybody's going to have to find their own flavor, and everybody's going to have to find that spot where what they're looking at makes them happy, makes them feel fulfilled. And that's going to change with time. Like, I look back at old pictures that I thought were amazing. I hate them. And vice versa. I look at pictures that I hated, and now I'm like, that was pretty good. Like, what was I thinking then?
Yeah. And I think that, to go off your baking analogy, I think that there's a process to bake. I love to cook, whatever. There's a process, but then you spice according to your own taste. Like that is the, and it's the same with taking photos. You're like, what am I going for? You don't have to, like, that's one of those. Yeah. Some people, I'd consider it a failure in teaching, is to say, like, you have to do it exactly this way. Anybody who speaks in absolutes, I would be a little bit skeptical of.
Yeah, that was very much, like I told you, the very first class that I took, and the only class that I've really taken. I've been to a lot of workshops over the years, mostly where I'm just kind of listening in and soaking in people that we sponsored when I was at other companies or things like that. But as far as actual class, like, part of the big problem was that I walked in and they were like, all right, put the lights at 45 and 45, put this one to half power, put this one to a 16th power, because we're going to go a 3-to-1 ratio, and the lights have to be exactly this. And I want you to shoot f11 at 200th of a second. And this is how you make a picture. And I'm like, all right. So when I go to replicate this, if I don't have the same space, the same section, the same lens, the same camera, the same everything, I can't do this. Right. And that's what, like I said, with me, I'm always like very process based. And if you can do that, if you can be consistent, then you can be creative. But if you try to be creative without even having yourself a basis and consistency, which goes what you just said about the cooking. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, again, when somebody goes, what do you think of this? I go, well, you cut their feet off. Right. I said, that one's a no-no. That's like an absolute no-no. You cut them at the ankle. Don't do that. But as far as the lighting, what do you think? Is it too bright? Is it too dark? How do you like the transfer of the light? Is this soft enough for you? Is it too hard? Because you got to get them thinking that, the photographer, you got to let them know that there are rights, but there aren't as many wrongs, if that makes sense. There are things you look at and you go, that's great. And there are things I look at and go, oh, it's not for me, but do you dig it? Yeah. I think it's all great. Then let's keep going. Yeah. Let's encourage your own vision of things, as opposed to, you have to be just like me. And I think that's one of those things that I see it a lot, because there's just this huge, almost cottage industry of people on social media saying, oh, this is what my settings were. And
people falling into like, well, I just got to use those settings if I want to. I'm going to copy that, and
100%.
Yeah.
And I put my exif data in my class, not because I want to, because I was basically told I had to, not by Westcott, but by students. Like, what were your settings for that? What were your settings? And if you heard that on the 30th time, you were like, all right, I'm just going to start putting the settings in because then I can avoid this. But I'm very careful to explain. These settings only work in that place at that time with this lens at this time of day at this size. Like,
there are too many variables.
Right. There's too many variables. Like, and I'm getting a lot of requests now for pullbacks. Is the new, I got to have more pullbacks to show where my lights were. And I'm like, all right, that probably has more value, but it's still, there's so many other variables that are involved in. Or so you can see where I put the lights, but you can't necessarily see where I was when I shot the picture, or where, there's just a lot going on.
I think that there's also, what can you learn from that information? Like, what can I learn from your EXIF data? Like, what was the shutter speed? Like, aperture?
That's more it.
Yeah. Like, what can I learn from this, as opposed to I'm going to copy that and I'm expecting to get the same result? It's kind of looking at it, and you have to be willing to take the next step of analyzing that and going like, oh, this happened because of where the sun was, where you like set, like all of these things together 100%. Kind of came together. And so that then when you go out, you kind of go like, I wonder if I adjust this slightly, whether it's your aperture, whether it's your shutter speed, your whatever the position of the lights, to get your desired result, as opposed to I want to like copy exactly what your original was.
Yeah, I would, you've been doing some quotes, but the Bruce Lee, don't stare at my finger because you'll miss the moon.
Right.
Like, I'm just pointing the way. I'm telling you where this is. Go that way. I love that feeling when, again, back to EXIF. I like when they look at one of my pictures and they're like, "What do you mean that's a third of a second?" And they're seeing a sharp picture, and I'm like, "All right." So that gives me a chance not to tell them that they should shoot at a third of a second, but to explain to them about flash duration. When I show them a picture that they're like, wait, I didn't think I could shoot it 2,000th of a second with flashes, and because they were stuck with normal sync at some point. And gives me the reason to talk about the creative possibilities of high speed sync. But I don't want them to go, all right, well, I got to walk out the door and shoot a 4,000th to 2.8, and I'll shoot, my pictures will be just like JC's.
Right.
Especially like, they're only like so good. I want them to be better.
I think it's those people who like sit there like, oh, you're gatekeeping by not telling me your settings. Like, no, I want you to be better. I want you to be better than copying somebody's settings and thinking that that's going to get you where you want to go. It's not going to get you where you want to go. And I want you to think critically about the situation that you're in, and not thinking, okay, because then you're going to go out there and you're going to like use the same settings and whatever and set the lights up to the exact same spot. And you're going to take a picture and you go, this looks nothing like, what the hell's wrong with, why did you give me that advice? You stink for like telling me that was going to work. No, I'm not going to tell you that that's going to work. I'm telling
the
you.
How and the why are much more important than the what.
Yeah.
For me, like if I can explain to you how, and I explain to you why I did it that way, then hopefully you can take that and apply it to your situation. Because if all you get is the what and you just copy it, you're never going to be happy.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
And, we're talking about making mistakes and like being willing to make mistakes. How do you keep from like, because this is something that I struggled with in my career as a photographer for a long time. When I'd make a mistake, I would get so critical of myself that it would hold me back creatively. And I would sit there and be like, okay, well, I can't try to do that again. Especially in the beginning of my career. And so how do you approach that now? Because I think we were in a similar place starting out, like when we were talking about like being afraid of flash or like doing certain things. I think that how do you get over that hump of making a mistake and then like thinking like, hey, this isn't going to stop me. This isn't going to keep me from moving forward.
So it's a great question. And I think that this is going to be about as harsh as I ever sound. Some people are going to make a mistake and it's going to stop them. And all that tells me is that they were never really passionate about it in the first place. Not everybody should be a photographer. Not everybody should be a cook. Not everybody should be a painter. I've tried to draw 1,000 times in my life, but I've been alive for 700,000 days or something.
Yeah.
Not really, whatever it is. And so, but I pick up my camera every day, whether, every day, not as an exercise. I love photography, and it's not always going to be a big shoot. It's not always going to be a big whatever. Sometimes it's going to be like, the sky looks really cool today. And like, bang. And it's not art, but I took a picture and I went out and I played and I kept myself familiar with my gear and I made sure, this conversation, again, tangent, man, but it ties into, I find photographers in general, and I'm probably going to garner somebody that'll be like, at me. Photographers, compared to a lot of other artisans, are a little on the lazy side as far as really going out and knowing what their tools can do. And the only way to do that is to go out and do it and try, like I have pictures in dark rooms of all of my soft boxes aimed at a wall to see what the fall off is and to see if I have my inner diffusion in or just my outer diffusion in, how much light did I lose. When I buy a new camera, one of the first things I do is I go out and I go through, all the high speed sync settings to see how much power I'm losing with this strobe, with this light, at this, because it's important to me. And a lot of people will look at me when I'm outside or when I'm teaching and I'm kind of like it's 2.8 at 2500th at this and put that power. And I'm like within a third of a stop. And it's the number one skill I have, if I'm being honest, that I'm a good guesser. But it's not really guessing. It's a lifetime of failing and going, but internalizing that failure, which goes back to what this ties back into what you said, which is I internalize that failure, but I never let that failure be the thing that stops the river flowing. I'm not building a dam with all my failures and all my bricks. I'm still taking those things and building them so that I can focus the water to where I want it to go. And I'm going, all right, this didn't work. And why didn't it work? Did it not go because of me? Like, was my skill set just not enough to accomplish this? Was it something where I was, and this happens to me a lot, especially now where I see people, I do the Mets, right? I go and I do these Mets portraits every year. And like every year if I see somebody else doing something where I'm like this, it's a hard fight not to be jealous, but also to be like, I want to do that, knowing that there will be limitations set upon me by somebody else or by my time or by a lot of other things. And sometimes you can get so frustrated going, I know I'm better than this. Why did this person do that?
Right.
And if you let that happen, you'll eventually just be like, why am I doing this?
Comparison is the death of joy.
Right. I compare to me as much as possible. I take influence from other people. I have a whole folder of screen grabs of, this is a cool idea. I'm not to go copy, but to go, that was a cool idea. How could I incorporate that down the road? It used to be just a folder, a file on my computer, but now it's screen grabs generally off of my phone, because that's where I am looking at most of my work, for better or worse. But how do I let my failures not be the thing that stops me from trying to create? Is that I love this thing. I love shooting. And I've definitely at various times known that I have not been as present in a moment as I should be because I was looking at it this way instead of just
experiencing it.
I think every photographer that really loves photography at some point will say that. But I also know that I'm not terribly sentimental about things, but I am sentimental about my photos. And, I will once every year, once every 2 years, do the whole, have I used this in the last 2 years or 3 years? Nope. Throw it out, and it's not a great thing because it leads to me at various times rebuying stuff, but not my photos. The photos will never go, because I know there are things in my life that I don't really remember, but I have a photo that tells me I was there, and my memory's not clear about it, but my memory of the photo is clear, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes absolute sense to me. And I think that that for me, that triggers a number of different responses, just thinking about that concept. And as we had talked earlier about, like, a photo can just like take you back, like the senses, like your senses, like a smell or a taste or whatever. And often I will go back and look at a photo I took and just be like, I'm right back there in that moment. And I where I might not have thought about it as clearly without the photo. I would like that picture really puts me in that moment in time in a way that if I was just thinking about it, does not. And you
Right.
also brought up a couple other things that I wanted to touch on that I thought were really good. Also, the being familiar with your gear and just taking the time to learn. Scott Bourne was on the show and talked about this a lot. It was just like go out and use your camera every day in some way. Doesn't have to be for a long period of time. It's just like, but using it and becoming so familiar with it that it becomes an extension of you, and you just know how to do it. And like you said, being a good guesser. I still shoot film sometimes, for me, not for clients. But and I will have people ask me like, well, how did you know to because the light meters on my cameras don't work anymore. Like they've burnt out a long time ago. And I have a little tiny thing that I'm not going out and like spot metering things with I'm out in the woods or whatever. And I have a little thing that kind of can dial me in a little bit to what the scene looks like. But I know, like I take pictures of my dog who is jet black.
Right.
I know how to expose that scene for my dog on film, on the fly. And they're like, well, how do you know how to do that? Because I've done this so many times that I know I can get myself dialed in pretty close. And lastly, the thing you brought up, I recently, there was a thing on Threads where somebody was like, you have to go to photography school. You absolutely have to go to photography school. And if you don't, like, you're wasting your time. And I had my responses on that, but then somebody was saying like, yeah, well, going to photography school helps you set up yourself for success in a way, like 6 months of grinding at it you could ruin your passion for photography. And I was just like, if 6 months of grinding is going to ruin your passion for photography, you weren't that passionate. And
I disagree with that notion completely. And I'm not here to put photo schools out of business. But every time, so prior to Westcott, I worked at Nikon, and we do a lot of events at big PJ schools and such, big photojournalism schools. And some of those kids would come to me and they'd be like, how did you get this? And how did you get that? Where did you go to school? I'm like, I didn't go to school for this. And they're like, oh, I'm like, if you want to go to school, what I recommend is go to business school and go to marketing school if you really want to be a photographer for a living, because I believe in my heart that most people can learn to shoot. And I also believe in my heart, and I feel bad saying this because somebody's going to be mad at me, but a lot of art school, there are some that are amazing. So there's always going to be, let me start with that. I do not want it to make it sound like I'm generalizing, but I've seen too many people that are teaching artists and art that are, what they're really doing is teaching them to do it like them.
right.
Which kind of goes again. We've already touched on this, so without diving more, but I hate that. Like I want to encourage people to explore and dance around and figure out and make mistakes and revel in those mistakes, but then move forward from them. And this whole idea that there's a right way or a wrong way, and that you have to use this rule and that rule, drives me nuts.
Yeah.
And I deal with it teaching all the time. Well, this person told me that. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I'm telling you that I think that it's pretty interesting when you decided to put the person on the close side to the edge of the rule of thirds. Yeah. And I feel very claustrophobic, and it's not comfortable, but
is that what you're going for?
I wouldn't do it all the time, but I think that you should feel free to explore that. You should feel free to, for the first 7 or 8 years, I've never heard the word soft so much, that the be all and end all of every portrait shoot was soft lighting. And I was like, if soft lighting tells the story you want to tell, that's great.
Right.
But it's not the be all. It's, because I would run into people all the time and go, well, you can't do portraits with this. It's too small. You can't do portraits with a bare light. It's going to give us hard light. And I go, well, I want hard light today. That's the brush that I pulled out of my palette today, and I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And if I look at that picture and I don't like it, I'll switch it. Wow.
Pull another tool out of the box and go with something else, because it's and I think that it's that you said you're not trying to breed copycats, and you want people to create what they want. Like you said, oh, this makes you uncomfortable. Like this composition makes you uncomfortable. Is that what I'm going for? Do I want to make you uncomfortable? Do I want to make you feel like maybe that's the point of the photo is to, and I think that people, when they get into those absolutes, like you always have to do this, or you always have to follow the rule of thirds, or you always have to.
That's the death of creativity.
Yeah, it's just you are no longer using your artistic voice in any way. You are just following a checklist. And again, I think that this is. I wrote down when you said it, like process over recipe, is such a like that is such a. Yeah, that's going to go up on my like post-it notes. Is like just a thing to keep in mind, and it you get there, you get to where you want to go, and not thinking about like what you've been told should be the destination. And it's one of those reasons I tell people not to get so obsessed with trends, because trends change. Whatever, like, and do you want to be the trendy person? If you do, okay, fine. That's what you want to do. But if you want to do different things, that's fine too. You can be yourself. I highly recommend it. You'll feel a lot more satisfied.
I took the slide out recently, but there was a slide in my class where, where I'm going through my rules for flash photography, and I make it clear, these are my rules for flash photography. And I put more like guidelines, it's always been my thing. And like, because I know that kind of sounds antithetical to everything I just said that, I don't want, but I was like, these are some guidelines, some head things. And one of them was get the flash out of the shoe whenever possible, because I said, I know it's trendy right now to have flat light, but it's going to go out of trend again.
Yeah.
And if you want to shoot a couple of pictures like that, feel free. But if you shoot all your pictures like that, you're going to look back at this shoot and you're going to go, oh man, like that was only cool for that year time, that 2 year time, whatever it was. And like, it's this. Yeah. Trends versus, true fashion is timeless, right? Where trends come and go. And style, like true style is timeless. Fashion comes and goes. I guess probably be a better one. But
I think that's probably more accurate. But I think that for me in my own photography,
coming from a guy with no sense of style,
I think that one of the things that I've aimed for probably in the last 15 years of my career has been like, let's make this timeless, because I want you to look back on. I do a lot of weddings, a lot of portraits. So I was just like, I want to make this something that you look back on in 20 years and you're not going, oh, that was so 2025. That was exactly. I want it to. I want you to go and be like, this could have been yesterday. And it's funny because at the same time that I made that decision in my shooting style, I still have some of those photos in my portfolio, and people will be like, "Oh, when was this?" And I'm like, "Oh, that was 2010." And they're like, "Really?" Like, yeah, because sometimes you really hit it. Sometimes you're like, when you make that this is my style. I'm not being ruled by what everybody else is trying to do. No. Then you get to have your voice, and you get to.
No, I totally agree. I couldn't agree more. And it's one of those things that I make sure to hit on when I'm teaching. That like I tell people, I said, I am very flashy. It doesn't mean you have to be. But if this process that I'm giving you means that you'll have a process and you don't have to be flashy, because I'm not giving you the recipe for the way I did it. I'm teaching you how to do lighting. And once we get some consistency, you can be as creative as you want. You can decide less, more. It really opens the doors. And I wish somebody had told me that the way in my head. I know that sounds like ego, and I'm sorry. I tend to not have that much. But on this one thing, I do wish that somebody had explained lighting to me and photography to me 20 years ago the way that I explain it now.
Well, I don't think
that much better.
I don't think that that's necessarily ego as much as it is like, this is something that you realize. What you're actually saying is, I wish somebody told me I could be me.
Yeah.
As opposed to saying you have to be like them. I think that's.
Yep. I think you just really, that was good.
That it's okay to be you and like what you like about photography and what you want your images to be. That's the crux of that is being okay with your own style. And I think, okay, so this leads me to another question. What advice would you have for photographers who are struggling to, with that fear of like, I'm not as good as everybody else. I am like, my photos aren't the same as everyone else's. And I'm afraid to be like me and do my own thing. What advice would you?
Yeah. All right. So there's a few things that I've told myself early on. And so I'm trying to put myself now in the shoes of somebody who's new and looking at work and doing what you just said, feeling like I'm insufficient because my work doesn't look like that. I wish somebody had told me sooner that how much of an influence post has on things. And I don't mean doing crazy Photoshop, but I do mean like I might spend, and I'm not saying this in a hooray me, I probably would be better maybe in certain things, but I have decided that I probably spend 80 seconds on each picture, so, something like that. There's not a lot of time. If there's a special need, if I'm shooting somebody that's high end and they've got some blemishes or whatever, yeah, I'll spend a couple of extra minutes on that. But I don't do a lot of other things. And at the beginning, when I'd be annoyed, like I don't do frequency separation or any of that. I'm not against it. I think it's great. And if I had a client that was willing to pay me to have to say I want this style, I'd pay somebody else to do that for me because it's not what I do.
Yeah.
But I do think it's important for some people to realize that, especially if you're a raw shooter, which I recommend to everybody. I think that we're all at that point. You should not I think too many people get hung up on this picture is the final picture that I took it and this is it. And then there's too many people also at the other end of that spectrum going, I'll just fix it in post. Right. These are two extreme ends of you got to lose somewhere in the middle. I'm losing all eloquence in trying to explain that.
No, I think that what you're trying to say, like get as much as you can right in the camera.
Right. Get as much as you can, but realize that you still got to frost that cake.
Yeah.
It's a cake and it might be delicious, but it's going to be better if we throw some good frosting on it.
Yeah. That's part of your recipe. That you shouldn't ignore. Yeah. Like it's not like, I got it and I can't like add some finishing touches to this. Like even that's something that I struggled with as well. Is I think it was because I was shooting weddings and thinking like I've got like thousands of photos to go through, and do I have time to spend this much? And then when Lightroom came along, being able to copy certain things and put them on things and go like, okay, you know what? All of my photos need a little bit of this, like my secret sauce, that I developed, and being like, okay, they need this, like a little bit of saturation in this color and a little bit of contrast here and these sorts of things to like add on to it, because otherwise it's just flat to me, so looking at it. And you putting that effort in there, it's the icing on the cake.
Because there were people that I don't want to say idolized, but looked up to. And then in various situations being in the industry, you end up starting to see some of their raw work.
Yeah,
and then
you see this straight out of the camera. And
it doesn't mean that their work is bad at all.
No.
It means that I realized that they were 90% there, but this nudge, this little 10%, took it from being a good picture to a great picture. And I at the beginning, I really wish somebody explained that to me, because I was just disappointed with myself all the time, going like, why do my colors not look like that? Why do my colors? Because I don't change my skies. I don't, selective color things very, like I'm telling you, I've got a preset that I built in Lightroom now, especially with all the ability to create some masks where I can just hit the skin or I can just do this. And that takes 12 seconds to apply to a picture. I look at it a little more closely. I might make sure that it didn't apply softening to the eyes, because sometimes it'll be a little aggressive with doing that. I don't want the eyes to be soft. But that's it. And I'm glad that I'm confident enough at this point to shoot in front of people, because there was definitely a point where I was like, oh, they're gonna think that and I'm like, no, I'm 90% there. They can see it, that
Right.
it's what it is. So I wish somebody had told me that to finish your thing, and I wish that somebody had told me that. This is going to sound contrary, but not contrary, but people don't like saying this. The gear does matter.
Mm.
It is not the defining thing. And I'm fond of telling people in classes these days that if you don't take a good picture today, that you're the problem. I do believe that. I do believe that everybody, but I also run into people that see my sports stuff and they're like, oh, I really want to go do that. I don't mean my sports portraits. I mean like my sports action. And like, I really want to do that. I'm like, okay. What do you have? And they'll describe a $600 camera with a $400 lens. And it's not that they can't make great pictures with that.
Right.
They can't necessarily make great pictures of moving action sports in bad light conditions and have them look the same as what I'm doing.
Right.
And I likewise will see somebody who has better gear than me and go, and part of me wants to believe that it's 100%. It's the photographer, it's the cook and not the pan, or whatever you want to use the analogy. But I also do know that it makes a difference. And
gear doesn't matter until it does. Is the one thing I always usually say. Like there's a certain amount, like
100%.
Like you said, you're not going to get the sports shot with your 24 to 70, like or whatever, like 1855 kit lens, like that's
70 to 300. You're just not capable. Right. It's not your fault.
Right.
And I'll tell them, you should still go out and shoot. Find a day with better light. Work on your timing. Work on spending on the game. Work on your autofocus techniques. Work on your framing.
Right.
And then it's going to be that much easier when the time comes where you can afford a better lens, because everything will transition forward. I've got friends of mine that have watched my work. And, I've switched camera companies a couple of times. Not because I thought it made a big difference, because, I took a job one place, I switched someplace else. My personal relationships make a difference, to what I shoot. But I will say that people who look at my pictures from 7 years ago, not talking about the camera, that they'll notice that my composition is very there or there. And they're like, well, why? And I'll say, well, because I was using all speed lights at that point, because I worked for a company that sold speed lights. And so I was like, there's also a little bit of it's good enough for Joe McNally. It's good enough for me. It's my hero. Right. And I still believe in that to a certain extent, not anything with Joe, that I could do it, but I'm going to at some point let the technology make some decisions. It's going to control my composition. It's going to control some f-stop choices or some shutter speed choices, because I'm not going to be able to do it. And that is one of the, doesn't break my heart, but if I'm teaching a class and, I try to get everybody in the class to shoot when I teach. And when somebody rolls up with a camera that can't do high speed sync after I've been really running high speed sync pictures to everybody, and then I'm like, all right, we'll make it work. So now instead we're going to stop down. Instead because we're going to be at 200th. And I'm like, this is just, I'm explaining to you that if you buy another camera in the future, it's going to do high speed sync, because if you spend more than $800 at this point, you can do it.
Right.
But this one, they can't do it. It doesn't matter, because process is still what matters. Just right now, when I say what aperture do you want to shoot, because aperture controls depth of field, you're going to, instead of telling me 2.8, you don't have a 2.8. You're going to say, right. I wanted to shoot at f11 because I really like that background. And I'm like, cool, let's make it work forward now. Just so that you remember that the next time, if you do get a camera that allows this function, that process didn't change. Now you're just going to shoot at 2.8. You're going to look at your triangle of exposure, and you're going to know that you were at 200th at f11 is the same as being at 2.8 at 2000. It's about that close. Yeah. I'm not really right, but it's close. And you're going to make the same picture, but with less depth of field. And you're going to look at it and go, oh, wow. And neither one was right. Those were both creative choices that you made. Because why should we do this? But they'll look at the work to finish that point. And I don't mean to hold up on it. They look at some of my new stuff now and they're like, man, you're really getting better. And some of them, even your photographer friends will do that stuff that frustrates your mom when you told her, wow, mom, this is great. You must have great pans. They never do that. But they do it to us all the time when they're like, you must have a great camera. I'm going to give a little plug here, but they're like, since you went to Westcott, your work's gotten a lot better. And it must be the lights that is the implication. And I'm like, well, it is the lights, but it's not the lights because suddenly the lights made me better, although they're consistent. Yeah. I don't mean to make this a commercial. It's that now I have more power. And now that freed me to make more choices.
Right.
It freed me to go, oh, I can do this now.
Right.
That I couldn't do.
You're working with a higher wattage. You can do different things,
right.
But it's all like you're saying, you're coming back to your process.
It combats that euphemism that people go, it's not the gear, it's the photographer.
Yeah, I think
so we're very certain. People love to say that. And I think that sometimes that hurts beginner photographers who think they should be able to do everything with this inexpensive piece of gear that they went out and got. And I hate, because I'll never say cheap. I'll say inexpensive because everybody's budget's different, right? So if I say cheap, for a lot of people, $600 on a camera is a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I remember when it would have been to me. And not that I'm rich. I've just decided that all other things in my life, like shirts and pants and,
are not as expensive
to store my stuff, are not as important as a camera. But the gear does make a difference. So the gear makes a difference. Post makes a difference. Because those are things that some people would love to tell you. I hear them presented as truisms that I don't do any posts. It's all straight out of camera. I know they're lying. And I just know they're lying. Or I can see it. And I feel like telling them, no, I can see that you don't do any posts. And you would have benefited from about 35 seconds of post. Your picture would have been better.
Right. The color is off or like whatever, like those sorts of things I see. Like I see people like friends who will get a professional like business headshot and they look green in it. And I'm just like, could you go back to your photographer and ask them to like color balance this a little bit better? Cause your skin tone looks a little blue or a little green and like whatever, like just ask them if they can spend 20 seconds on this in post or send it to me and I'll do it for you.
One of the things that brings me real joy, like real genuine joy, is when a student, an attendee, whatever, at a class posts a picture and tags me in it. But every now and again, I'm like this. Couldn't you have taken the pimple off of here? Couldn't you have done that? Like, because the subject doesn't like it and it makes it look, it kind of goes to what you said before that, you're like, well, you're not the problem. You're the problem. I think it might've been before we came on, we had that conversation of leading to like how people look at things. And I'm like, that picture's now got my name on it. And I've never asked anybody to take it off. I've never done that. I've just been like, but I more often is, how come mine looks like this and yours looks like this? We shot 40 seconds apart. I'm like, because I said, if you want to get on a Zoom, I'll show you what I do in Lightroom. It took 38 seconds and the person just looks a little bit better. And they're like,
yeah. What's the color and like, and all of these other things,
texture in the skin, a little this, like tiny little changes.
Yeah.
I'm not, like I said, I'm not doing, I hate when somebody goes, oh, that's great Photoshop. That hurts. That breaks my heart too.
Yeah.
Like that breaks my heart. But
I always tell my clients, like I use the term special sauce because it's the same thing it's different for each photographer, like what you want to do with your photos, but learning to do that in post and learning just enough of Lightroom or Photoshop or whatever editing software that you're using to make those subtle adjustments can have like, okay, I'm assuming since you're photographing the Mets and other sports stuff, that you understand some sports metaphors. It's a game of inches.
Yes.
And what separates a like you said, it's not cheap, inexpensive. You can have inexpensive equipment and make really amazing photos. It comes down to like when you're making that jump to like certain aspects of photography. I was in the Heather Larkin's macro class at Unique when the same weekend that you and I met. And there were people in there with their like kit lenses trying to take macro shots and not understanding why they couldn't get the same looking photo. And I, like Heather was very good with them. And, I was like trying to like tell people like, well, part of this is your gear. And if this is something you really want to do, you may want, and I would say like, you may want to invest in the gear if this is something that really entices you, but you're going to come up against limitations on your gear. And
even other times they go, why do you need a camera that shoots 30 frames a second? You mostly shoot portraits. And I'll go, oh, you're right. I said, I could do this with this other camera. But going back to, if I want to build a house, I could do it with a hammer. But if I have a nail gun, my life is a lot easier.
Yeah.
I'm going to take advantage of that. I had a guy the other day showed up and he pretty much insisted on manually focusing. He had a Z8, great focus system, and I had to sit him down and go through and show him iFocus because he didn't know that he had it. And I said, I don't shoot mirrorless because it's lighter. My camera's not lighter. I don't shoot mirrorless because of anything. I shoot my A1 because I put it in auto iFocus. And when I'm shooting, it has taken away a barrier between me and my subject, where now I know it's going to catch their eye almost all the time. 99.9, like ivory snow, it's going to catch. And that technology, I'm not going to be a person who's going to hide behind. Like you, I have one film camera left. I pick it up on occasion because it reminds me of how hard this whole thing can be. And sometimes it's good to have your face stuck in the dirt for a second to be like, all right, like when things go bad, like you almost feel the most alive. You're like, you're struggling. But so many people insist on not taking advantage of technology. And I'm like, why? Like, I want the better thing. I want the better thing, not because of status or because of anything, because it makes me able to do what I want to do better and easier.
Right. And knowing how to use that tool to realize your personal vision.
My vision.
Yeah. Right. Hey, photographers. Tired of spending hours culling, editing, and publishing your photos? Narrative does it all for you faster and smarter. With AI photo culling, you can quickly sort through thousands of images to find the best shots. With AI editing, you can customize edits to match your personal style effortlessly. And with publishing made simple, you can share stunning blogs with ease. Save time, stay creative, and let Narrative handle the heavy lifting. When you use the link in the episode notes to try Narrative, you get 10% off and an additional 200 credits for edits. What are you waiting for? Try Narrative today. Visit the link in the episode notes and get started for free. Do you have your own website? Are you tired of dealing with slow loading pages and poor support from your current web hosting company? Consider switching to SiteGround, the top-rated web hosting company that provides 24/7 support and super fast hosting speeds. SiteGround's platform is built on the premium Google Cloud infrastructure, ensuring top reliability, security, and speed for your website. Their fast network and storage provide optimal site speed and a high level of redundancy, so you can trust that your website will be up and running smoothly at all times. With SiteGround's ultra-fast server setup, your pages will load 30% faster on average, giving your visitors a better user experience and improving your website's SEO. And with hosting starting from just $199 per month, it's affordable for any budget. Plus, if you're not completely satisfied, SiteGround offers a 30-day money-back guarantee. Don't suffer with a terrible web hosting company any longer. Make the switch to SiteGround and experience top-level support, super fast hosting, and a reliable, secure platform for your website. I spent years with a web hosting company that was absolutely terrible. My site was constantly getting hacked and support was nearly impossible to get a hold of. Since switching to SiteGround, all of those problems are in the past. Just visit nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/SiteGround or click the link in the episode notes to get started and begin enjoying faster, more reliable web hosting today. Hey. And now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. This is always death. Okay. So the episode. Again, I'm not going to hold it against you that you photographed the Mets as a Detroit sports fan. They were my adopted team when I moved to New York.
I could. Detroit's like one of those ones that I don't hate, obviously, because like I got no reason to. It's not like the guys across in the Bronx.
Yeah. Well, when I moved to New York, I adopted the Mets and Jets as my like sort of like local teams that I would root for, and I convinced my wife, who was a Yankees fan, to like move over to the Mets. It took going to a lot of Mets games and just like the atmosphere being so different Like is people in just having fun and enjoying themselves as opposed to like, I don't know, like the Yankees games were not nearly as entertaining. Probably not as entertaining for her because we always went when they were playing Detroit, and Detroit beat them every time we were there. So before Babe Ruth, what do you think Major League Baseball's career run record was? How many home runs do you think were the career home run record?
17
for the career?
No, for total. I thought you meant in a season.
No,
for the 61 and all.
No.
All right, career. Is it like Honus Wagner? It's somebody like that, and it's going to be like 138 or something like that.
You are exactly right on the number. It was 100. It was 138 after Ruth, 714.
Yeah, it's bonkers.
Yeah,
Who is it?
I don't know who it was. I just like
I'm gonna have to go find out now.
It was 138. You might be right. It might be Ty Cobb.
It's one of those guys. I mean, yeah, he at the time when he was hitting 50, he was hitting more than the whole league combined.
Yeah,
it was just bonkers.
Yeah, I think that he was like a pitcher as well. Like
as a Red Sox, he was a pitcher, and then they stopped him because he could hit too much.
Yeah, they wanted him to actually be up there. JC,
a good pitcher though.
JC, it's a pleasure having you on.
I really appreciate you having me on.
Where can people find you on the interweb?
JC Photo Media. If you Google it, you'll either find my Instagram or my website. If you go to either one of those, you'll find the other. Pretty active. There's also a Facebook page for it, but I don't always go to it. Any posts on there are from one of the others. Just get shared automatically. But yeah, JC, like my name, photo, like what we do, and media, because every now and again there'll be a video. Very rarely.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you coming to talk to us today.
Thanks.
And we're back. Thanks to JC Carey for coming on the show. I hope our discussion makes you think differently about making mistakes when it comes to photography. You can find all of JC's links in the episode notes, and while you're in follow mode, be sure to subscribe to the show. And if you're feeling extra generous, leave us a review. You can also follow @TheNerdyPhoto on Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Threads, and Reddit for more fun between episodes. That's @TheNerdyPhoto. No dots, underscores, or dashes.
Have you figured out how to extricate us from this predicament?
I do have an idea. Something I saw in a cartoon once. Until next time, everyone, stay safe and stay nerdy.
Who's that coming back to town? You better start listening. Who's your heart been beating about? You better listen.